All right, people, and welcome back to the Plan Mode Talk. And some years ago, my cousin had gone to Japan on a trip with her soon-to-be then husband, and she sent me back a variety of gifts. One of which was a photo. It wasn't a physical photo, but it was a photo she took on her phone. And she took a photo of the Gundam RX-72 that was there for a while. And this was around the time I was getting a little heavier into anime. I had already watched Gundam Wing, and she had known through family talking and stuff that I was big into mecha anime at the time, and so she had sent me a photo of this Gundam. Now, mind you, the only exposure to Gundam I've had was Gundam Wing and Gundam Wing Endless Waltz back then. So there wasn't any exposure to Mobile Suit Gundam, Gundam Double O, Gundam Seed, none of it. I wasn't exposed to any of that stuff because back in the year 2000 to 2003, the market for that, from what I could see from where I lived, was quite limited. So I relied on Toonami. So I got my anime fix through Toonami and what I could find at the movie rental store. All that to say, that sparked a curiosity in me about this potential reality of what these things could be, what these things could look like. Sure, we can build a statue that has limited mobility in Japan, and it looks great. It mimics one of the things that we, as fans and people that are just now getting into Gundam like about the mecha anime is that these things look amazing. They're just a fantastical interpretation of our imagination of what what we want to see, what we dream of, things that we'd love to experience, but we know we can't very well experience these things because they're not real. They don't exist. I fantasize sometimes of what it would be like to be in the pilot seat that Hiro Yui was in, or Char Aznavour is in, or Amuro Ray, or Mikitsuki, or or Satsuna, or any of those people. I would want to, or the characters, not people, characters, because they're fictional, right? But you wonder, what would it be like to pilot the Strike Freedom, or the Wing Zero, or the or Wing Gundam, or the Sazabi, or any of these mobile suits or Gundams. What would it be like? Well, there's no real reality to that. There's no real way of knowing. But as we get into this, the question is really, what if? What if these things really did exist? What would that really look like, honestly? And I mean, could we really build something this big and it be practical? Is it possible? I'm as much of a fan as I am of these things. I don't see how we would be able to not only afford, mind you, but engineer something like this. I think though we might have the technology to develop the mechanics and develop the I think we have a lot of these skills to build most of this, but I don't think we have the right technology in place to really power these things, to overcome the challenges that are inherent with these massive mobile suits. Let's think about the weight for a minute here. Like, what kind of material would we be talking about with these Gundams? Well, we don't have Gundanium. We don't have that. So what would we use in its place? Steel? That's heavy. Could use copper. That's not a good material. Could we use titanium? Sure, we could use titanium, but it's also heavy. So all the metals we have right now, would that be sustainable to use for a Gundam? Would it also be strong enough to maintain in a battle or a modern conflict? Would it be ideal? Should we entertain things like carbon fiber in certain areas of it? I mean, are we going to be looking at alternative methods and materials to produce these things? Because 60-foot tall, a 60-foot tall Gundam or mobile suit in this case would be incredibly heavy and would be the nightmare of engineering to achieve this goal would just be astronomical. I think for us to even consider building one of these things, we'd have to look at what it would take, how this would really work. And so if we looked at, again, we go back to the weight problem. You look at steel and titanium, that stuff is just incredibly heavy. Carbon fiber, it's lightweight, but it doesn't have a lot for protection value. So what are you going to use to complement that to help with protection? Who knows? You're going to have to use some kind of steel alloy or titanium alloy or something that kind of blends together that can be a little lighter. But then on top of the weight issue, you have balance and stability issues because these things are so huge and bipedal. I mean, it's not like we're going to say, hey, go build a gun cannon, go build the gun tank. Yeah, sure. If we build a gun tank, you got tracks. You got this wide balance on the bottom of this vehicle, this mobile suit. So you wouldn't have to worry so much about that. But if you're building a bipedal mechanoid or a mecha suit, then you got to worry about how is this thing going to be stabilized? The amount of gyros in this thing would have to be incredible in order to keep this thing on its feet. Honestly, I think this thing would be incredibly unstable. I don't think it would really work. And let's think for a moment here. If we were to build one of these things, let's go down this road a little bit. If we were to build one of these things and say, okay, the United States has built a mobile suit, that'd be incredible. I mean, what would that look like? What would we do with this? How would we? I mean, there'd be. I mean, again, the what if aspect of this. You're going to look at that thing and go, how the hell does that thing move? How does that maintain its ability to walk over uneven terrain, take turns, rapid turns for that matter, and adjust for weapon recoil or any kind of hits? Most likely what's going to end up happening, this thing's going to fall flat on its butt and be done, or fall on its back and not be able to get up. I don't think there's any way for this to work currently as we are right now. Like I said earlier, I think we could probably build some of these things or some parts of these mobile suits, but I don't think we could build a whole one. And then when you look at the whole thing together, when you put all these pieces together, and especially when you're building Gunpla, right? You look at this stuff, man, this is awesome. But if you look at this in a real world application, you got to think this thing is going to wear out. You see this in cars, right? You can see a car last 10, 15 years if you're lucky. And you're talking like normal wear and tear, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing crazy that you're doing, no off-roading, no racing. We're just talking everyday wear and tear, right? So everyday wear and tear, you can probably get a good 10, 15 years out of a car if you take care of it. But as we see in the applications that we use our current, I guess if we were looking at mobile suits as a piece of equipment for a war, so if we look at the way we use our tanks, the Humvees, for example, you can look online and buy a used Humvee, but that thing has got 600,000 miles on it. Thing's torn apart. You're going to have to dump another $20,000, $30,000 into that thing just to get it running if you're lucky. And I guess this is ballpark. This is speculation. Arbitrary numbers. Do not hold me to those numbers when I'm talking about building up a car, because every car is different. Every car takes a different kind of amount of money to get up and going, and parts cost all vary. So do not hold me to that. I'm just throwing out arbitrary numbers. So if we take a $30,000 approach to rebuilding a car, right? If we go that direction, like a used Humvee, we just dump $30,000 into this thing. $30,000 into this thing. What if we, we take that and we put that into the aspect of a Gundam? Well, we know that some of these fighter jets that we have currently are multi-million, if not billion-dollar machines. So you're talking about a 60-foot Gundam, a 60-foot mobile suit. Well, suddenly you're talking most likely a multi-billion-dollar machine per machine. So what does that look like, when it comes to maintaining these things? I don't even know where to begin, and the logistical nightmare of managing the cost of maintaining these things, because you're not only looking at what these things are made of, but then you're requiring entire teams of people to come together to build these things and to maintain these things. So it's not just one mechanic per car. We're probably talking 30 or 40 mechanics per car. Well, if you look at some of the flag hours, and these flag hours that I'm aware of are the ones that I was aware of when I was early on in my life when I tried to be a mechanic. Some of these flag hours, I heard people talking about $70, $100 an hour for flag hours. Well, if we talk about paying a mechanic an average salary of, we'll just throw another number out there. Let's say it's like $50 per flag hour or $50 an hour for you maintain. They'd be pretty low, but we're just spitballing that. It's $50 an hour for a mechanic, and we say that's a 40-hour work week, right? We do the math based off that. What's $2,000, right? So that's every biweekly. That's $4,000. Well, if you're doing $4,000 per person per month per pay period, so that's 2 weeks. So per month is $8,000. So $8,000 per month for one mechanic or one engineer, which we know is low, but we're just gonna go with that. We do that number, and then you multiply that by 10. Well, suddenly it's $80,000. Well, if we don't multiply that by 100, that's $800,000. So you're not even paying that as a yearly salary. You're paying that as a monthly salary over a multitude of varied skill sets, and that's just the OPEX, right? That's the OPEX, not even the CAPEX, right? The CAPEX is what you're going to be buying to put into this crap, but the OPEX alone is going to eat you alive. So the amount of funding that's going to have to go behind this thing is just incredible. So you're going to have to, and I know it went from weight, strength, balance, and stability, and joint wear and stress. But then if you look at the logistical nightmare of just maintaining these things, it can get incredibly expensive, because you're going to have to build, like anything, you're going to have to build an infrastructure around this. And then around the infrastructure, you're going to have to build most likely a city or something where you're going to be able to dump all the money into in an economy of sorts and keep, regurgitating that, keep funneling that money, you're going to have to build some kind of society around this that funds this project, not just we're going to leech a crap ton of money off the government and we're just going to build this stuff. There's going to have to be like real thought into how this is going to work, because this is going to get expensive. You're going to have to pay the engineers. You're going to have to feed them. You're going to have to, you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to house these mobile suits. You're going to have to maintain them. You're going to have to equip them with the latest gear. You're going to have to refit them after so many years. And on like a car, you might replace a water pump every couple of years if you're unfortunate. If you're fortunate, that water pump lasts, the entire life of the car. I've seen it happen. Granted, it's rare, but it happens. But, if these things are used every day and more than just a casual, I'm going to drive 5 minutes up to work, no big deal. It's the kind of situation, and these things are actually used for battle or used for what they're used for in the shows, then we're going to start seeing some incredible expenses. And so money-wise, we're talking some serious expense, not just on the platform itself, but on the people that are going to help maintain this thing. So anyway, we can move on a little bit beyond that topic, because that was pretty long-winded. Sometimes I think I get in these little tangents. I think this kind of episode is perfect for this, because these are wild speculations, right? So this kind of episode allows for that wild tangent, wild explanation to kind of occur. it's just some of those things that you sit there and if you're like me or if you're not, but if you're like me, you kind of sit there and look at something and go, I wonder if, what would that look like? Naturally, I'm pretty inquisitive, so sometimes I do look at these things and go, wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something if this existed? What would that look like? And for the most part, most people don't think about the cost associated to it, how this would actually work, the practicality of this. Most people think, man, it'd be awesome to pilot these things. We live in a fantasy world, really, if you think about it. We live in a fantasy idea of what this would look like. We don't really look at the actual implications of what the cost of this would be, material around it, how much that would be to get that, and what kind of material we would use, what challenges we'd face, whether it comes with, is two legs on this thing ideal? Can we maintain that kind of structure long term? Do we need to look at another way of handling this? Is bipedal walking tank basically the way to go? And my thought immediately goes, as we're talking about this, or as I'm talking about this, my thought immediately goes, what would these look like? Well, we clearly don't have the capability of jet propulsion that will move something that weighs this heavy any great distance. And then you're looking at fuel consumption. What kind of fuel are you going to use? Well, if we use a standard jet fuel, that's not going to be, that's going to burn too quickly, and it's not going to be able to offer enough propulsion to get these things to move very far, because we're looking at a 60-foot tall structure, 60-foot tall mech suit versus what would we see like an F-22, an F-35, F-18. These things are lighter weight in comparison. So the propulsion behind, their system can push these things, get them out in the air, and they can move fast, quick, they're nimble. But if you look at something that is 60 foot tall with the weight of steel and titanium, then you're starting to look at how would jet propulsion work with these. I think our current standard of jet propulsion would barely even tip the scales, or would barely even work or suffice for these in any realistic way. I don't think it would work. I don't think it would happen. So when you look at, what would one of these mobile suits look like? In my mind, my initial thought was, I go back to Gundam Wing. What would this look like? Well, it would most likely look like a Leo, a ground type Leo, or a ground type Jim, or it wouldn't look like. It would. I don't think it would be what we'd want it to be or what we'd expect it to be. I think practicality alone, that alone would drive what we would be able to accomplish with this, right? And so outside of the expense, you got to look at how practical this would be to design something that could fly. Well, if you're looking at a 60-foot Gundam with a wingspan like the Strike Freedom, well, suddenly, how do you move that thing? How does that thing fly? Well, I mean, we don't have any kind of reactors anywhere close to what the show tells us that they have. So what do? Well, nuclear reactors are huge. Those aren't going to work. And you got to cool the suckers. So that fuel is out of the question. So what do we use? Fission? Can't use fission. I guess to say, for lack of a better phrase or lack of a better term, we've yet to tame the beast really in that area. So what do you do? How do you get something that big to move with jet propulsion? The answer right now, I believe, is you don't. So what are you left with? You're left with a mechanical suit that can walk on the ground. So in my mind, how different is that from actually just saying, why not just keep using a tank? Why not just keep using the M1 Abram? Right? It's a walking tank essentially. What are you going to do with a 60-foot tank? I honestly don't think you would do much with it. You'd have limited mobility. It would be slow. You wouldn't be nimble. You wouldn't be nimble at all. It wouldn't be agile. It would be stuck going. You play games like, so we'll go into a game like MechWarrior, right? So MechWarrior is probably the closest example that we can get into this. So you look at MechWarrior and you look at some of the, I guess you would say, for the lack of the suits that they pilot in that, and that seems pretty fantastical as well. But they seem to be a lot more practical in purpose, and they aren't as large. Well, except for the Atlas. The Atlas is huge, but you look at some of the other those mid-size or the smaller size MechWarrior or mechs from MechWarrior, and yeah, that seems a little bit more practical. They seem to be developed to be a lot more nimble now. I mean, arguably, they're again not real, so there's no way to really know. But if you compare apples to oranges in this case, a MechWarrior versus a Gundam, which is going to be more practical? Well, I would lean probably towards a mech from MechWarrior, probably be a little bit more practical. It's probably balanced a lot better. Probably, it just looks like, since it's close to the ground, there's this center of gravity concept, especially like when you're looking at cars. Like if you get like a 4x4, right, and you lift this thing 6 inches, well, suddenly your center of gravity changes. And so the taller you get, the less center of gravity you have, the easier you are to tip over. So the lower at the ground you are, the more widespread you distribute your weight and your center of balance, the harder it is for you to tip over. And so with MechWarrior suits versus the Gundam suits, I would say the MechWarrior suits would probably be a lot more nimble, easier to maintain and manage, or maintain and manipulate, and they'd probably be a lot more agile. And so getting back into like the mobile suit world, if we were to build something like the Leos or something like the Gym or a Zaku or something to that effect, because that'd probably be like the closest level of representation that we could currently get at the moment. They'd be slow. They would absolutely be slow. And if we developed one now, it would ultimately be a prototype, mainly because it'd be wildly expensive to produce. And so I don't think you'd see any modernized or developed country building these in scale or in any substantial scale, really. I think they would build their own version of one, and test it out for 20 or 30 years. I really don't think it would go beyond anything than a prototype. And we've seen that in documentaries with World War II, where United States and Germany and other countries are developing prototypes of all sorts of things that never saw the light of day until 40, 50, 60 years later, where they're like, oh, look, the Germans are working on this, the Americans are working on this, and we never developed it. Why? Because it was impractical. It was wildly impractical. And so I think any real version of these from the start would be wildly impractical. I don't think that would work. So I think it would be 20 or 30 years, 40, 50 years even, before we can even get to that point. And by that time, you and I are going to be long gone. If you're still young, you'll still be around. You might even see this. But for most of us that are in our 30s and 40s, 40, 50 years from now, we're going to be long gone. We're not even going to be witnessing anything going on. And though it'd be exciting to think, what if? I just don't think it's going to happen. Not in our lifetime, I don't think. Is it possible? Sure. I think with enough technological advances, we'd be able to. I think we'd be able to get there. But today, in 2025, it's funny. We talk about 2025, and years ago, I remember when I was a kid. So this is going to be 20 years ago, or more. Actually, I was watching the Jetsons, and I loved that show. I loved it as a kid. I loved that cartoon. And I thought to myself, man, wouldn't it be cool to have flying cars? It's 2025. We have propulsion systems to power our current fighter jets and some light planes, but we're barely scratching the surface at what a flying car would still look like. And right now it still uses, some of the ones I've seen still use propellers as it's a primary propulsion system. So I don't think, if we're not there yet with cars, flying cars for that matter, we're probably not going to be there with mobile suits in a while. And that's to say mobile suits would even be a thing, right? So, I would say that fantasy mimics reality, or fiction mimics reality, and reality mimics fiction. We saw that with Star Trek when it came out in the 60s. We saw, the flip phone was developed because of the communicator. And still, people still talk about the transporters. We can do it. Or some people vehemently are against the idea of transformers. Like they believe that they couldn't do it. But my point I'm trying to get to is, even if fiction mimic reality or reality mimic fiction, if we were to go and build one of these, and I say if we being the generalized we, whomever that we may be, builds these things, it's probably not going to be in our lifetime. It'll probably be somewhere far, far down in the future when we've had enough leaps in science and technology that allow us to build these things in scale and in mass. And by that time, would Gundam even really be a thing? Would anybody really be interested in Gundam, or Gunpla for that matter, if these became a reality? That's a good question, I think. Thoughts. What are your thoughts? What do you think? Based off all the nonsense and rambling that I've done, what do you think? What are your opinions on this? Do you think that this is achievable? Maybe I'm way off base, but some of the stuff I talked about, I think with some of the understanding that I have of our current ability to engineer things, and our ability to get in our own way, and everything to have some crazy amount of red tape around it, I really don't think even attempting to do something like this is achievable, just because the human element is so terrible at the moment. So I think, again, like